go. Wrong scene. Good morning, everybody. Welcome on in. I'm your host, Bull Muscle. We got a great show for you, and I just realized I am out of water. That won't do. Much better. All right, so I've had my breakfast, and this is one I've been wanting to do for a little while, honestly. It is, I cannot overstate the amount of money, a truly life-changing amount of money you can save, and the amount of amazing shit that happens when you just start riding a bike places. I call it a money printing youth machine, and I'm 100% borrowing that from Mr. Money Mustache, but it's true. There we go. Right, and I'm doing this stream shirtless entirely to drive the point home here, okay? This didn't happen by accident, but a large part of even sitting down, why you can see my abs, is because I ride a bike around everywhere. Now, last night, unfortunately, I ended up hitting a bike pothole or something. I don't even know what it was. Actually, it may have just been a tire failure, and a giant hole ripped in the tire. So I'm getting that patched up today. But even though I pay someone to do all my bike work for me instead of doing it myself, just because it's an electric bike and dropping the rear tire is a pain in the ass, frankly. Watching your stream at a birthday party. If you need me to cover up, just say so. But here's where this comes from. There are several channels on YouTube that I'm a big fan of. One of them is Aaron Clary. I don't agree with everything he says. First off, he's definitely a lot more right-wing than I am, but he has a lot of interesting economic analyses and takes, and one of them that kind of inspired by the way he runs his numbers is what is the economic benefits of cycling? So I decided to do a little bit of digging myself. I made this almost a sort of a pseudo white paper on it, and what I did was I broke the benefits of cycling versus driving into a micro/individual side and a macro/societal side, right? So what would happen if individually you were the average person who started biking, or what would happen if just a fraction of society started doing that? What my analysis concluded is that the economic benefits to cycling over driving are outrageously large to the point where I think we fail to understand just how large it is. Apart from avoiding a divorce, frankly, it is the single best way to multiply one's wealth. The divorce is, if you are a man especially, going to demolish your finances. Even getting into a bad house, at least it's not an asset that appreciates that poorly. But multiplying your finances, riding a bike is huge. So let's get into it. To the average individual range, if you were to take the savings just from not riding half the time, okay? Let's just say you live in a cold climate, you don't want to bike in the winter. That's a bullshit excuse, but let's say you don't want to do that. But just a non-obese person cutting car usage in half, okay? Over 10 years, you would save $70,000, okay? Now, $70,000, let's say you start that at age 18. You've got $70,000 now that you saved and invested in the S&P 500. You do that, that's $70,000 at age 28. Using the rule of 72, we've been over this. So what is the rule of 72? We'll break out the maths for this one, of course. All right. Rule of 72, okay? Okay, so X equals 72 over I, where I equals the interest rate, okay, or the return on investments you're getting, and X equals number of years to double. Historically, the S&P 500, on average, after inflation, gets you roughly 70%. In other words, you put 7% in for I, so 72 over 7, and you get an X of roughly 10 years. In other words, as near as makes no difference, if you invest your money in the S&P 500 and it performs to the historical average, you will see your money double roughly every 10 years. So let's say, again, you start at age 18. At age 28, you saved that $70,000 from riding a bike. Let's just say you stop and you become your average, normal, conformist, standard American fat boy, whatever. But you just left that $70,000 alone. You no longer need to save for retirement because at age 38, that becomes $140,000. At age 48, that becomes $280,000. At age 58, that becomes $560,000. And at age 68, that becomes over $1 million. Okay? Do I have your attention now? Are the alarm bells ringing yet? All right? And that's just for a non-obese person cutting car usage in half. For an obese person ditching the car altogether, at minimum, $221,000 over the course of 10 years. Okay? Do I have your attention yet? These are life-changing sums of money, people. Life-changing. Now, to U.S. society at large, and this is assuming a small fraction of people who would otherwise replace feasible trips by car, we just take a fraction of those feasible trips. We're talking 1 to 4 mile trips, which, yes, you can bike 1 to 4 miles. You're not that fucking lazy and you're not that fucking weak. You replace those with a bicycle, we're talking a minimum cost savings of at least $168 billion a year. For reference, that is more money than all the aid we've given to Ukraine since 2022, more than double, okay? If you were less conservative with the number of people switching than the ones used, the societal benefit probably gets closer to the $1 trillion mark. And frankly, I didn't even calculate a lot of the secondary and tertiary knock-on effects economically of this, okay? So from a philosophical standpoint, right, just influencing this decision-making, go look at Jacob Fisker of Early Retirement Extreme and Mr. Money Mustache. If you have heard anything of what I've been talking about over the last few years, you should know who those two people are. If you don't, go look them up. Both of them heavily espouse cycling as a way to achieve a thinner gut and a fatter wallet, okay? And Mr. Money Mustache in particular is excellent about this. The man is a multimillionaire at this point, but he still rides a bike around no matter what the weather. And he lives in Colorado, so he goes through cold winters. All right, okay? You're definitely going all Alec Baldwin from Glengarry Glen Ross. Good to see you. All right, you know what? We're going to stand for this because I think y'all would rather see me standing. The whole point here is to drive the point home. This isn't just eye candy for today. This is to say, ride a goddamn bicycle, okay? All right. Let's carry on. These are numbers I'm drawing from the Bureau of Transport Statistics, okay? This is the US government's data. If you would like to make quibbles with my data, find another data set and show me it. The average cost of ownership for a car in the United States is $12,500 per year, or just over $1,000 a month. Okay, that's just the average. So you have the people who are intelligent and buy cheap, efficient used cars, balanced out by the people who are less intelligent and buy, or even worse, finance brand new, expensive luxury cars and trucks. Assuming, okay, we'll just take $500 a year, okay, and set that aside for all the maintenance you need to do on a bicycle, right? Now, that number isn't talking about the purchase price. This is just talking about depreciation and operating costs, which, by the way, are a lot bigger than just fuel. If you are using just fuel to calculate the cost of driving, you're wrong, okay? You're making a massive mistake. So this annual savings at $12,000 per year per car, okay? So $12,500 minus the $500 for things like bike maintenance, the occasional car rental, or Uber or public transit. That savings is $12,000 a year. That invested over 10 years in the S&P 500 equals $173,000. Now again, if you just did that from ages 18 to 27, and at age 28 you decided to go and be your standard average American, frankly, loser for the rest of your life, you let that compound and it would handle all of your retirement needs. By the age of 60, if you did that, you would have over $1.6 million fucking dollars. Do I make myself clear? $1.6 million Now, obviously, okay, I get it. Living car free is not for everybody. What if I live in a rural area? Or what if I live in a suburb and I want to have the good schools and I want to commute every single day and yada yada yada. First off, okay. If you're going to, right, let's say you're a family. If you're a family and you got two people working, right? I personally am a huge fan of just having a single family income, but that requires frugality. But if you're the modern family and you got two incomes, you really should be living at least within biking distance of one of those person's jobs. There's really no excuse for that. If you do that, you can become a one-car family and thereby getting those savings of $173,000 on average per year, or per 10 years, excuse me. Right? But let's go ahead and say if you're a single person, right? If you're a single person, you're living in either an urban or suburban area, it's doable. It really is. And many people do get by with a bike in their college years. Why? Well, because money it's scarce, it's tight. You're broke when you're in college for the most part, unless you come from a rich fucking family, right? And, oh, but the weather is so hard. And stop it. Stop being a pussy. Stop making excuses. I lived in College Station, Texas in the summertime. And you know what I did? I biked around. College Station is fucking hot and it's fucking humid. You live with it. You drink some more water. You just deal with, sometimes you're gonna be sweating a bit when you get to class. You're gonna be okay. It's the same thing if you live in a place like Minnesota, actually, Minneapolis being one of the most cycling heavy cities in the country. You do that, you just, it's an old German saying, or maybe it's Norwegian, some Northern European saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. Bundle the fuck up and get some cycling in. And the funny part is you need far fewer layers in the cold when you're cycling because you're going to elevate your heart rate and therefore pump more blood. And when you're pumping more blood, your body temperature is going, you're burning calories, you're going to be increasing your body temperature and it's not going to feel as cold. Okay? Nowadays, even here, obviously, right, I don't have the weather problem. I live in paradise, but I can still make the Costco run on my bike. You know how I do that? Here, I'll show you. I've got this little backpack you can get for 50 bucks off of Amazon, and inside here are two side saddle bags. It's not that complicated. You put them on your bike, and you're good to go. And if you're a single person, first off, that's more than enough space for your weekly groceries. If you need perishables, you get an insulated refrigerator bag and an ice pack, okay? You can find these at Walmart, or if you're really clever, the Salvation Army or Goodwill for peanuts. It's not hard to figure out. All right, so for families, again, you should be living at least close to one person's job. But all right, let's do the math for someone who doesn't want to give up the car. Let's just put all that aside for a moment. But you're willing to cycle to work enough of the time to cut the mileage off the car in half. So per the Federal Highway Administration, the average American drives roughly 14,500 miles per year. So let's say you cut it in half, that's 7,250 miles. At present, the IRS reimbursement for car mileage is 67 cents per mile. Frankly, I went and did a massive derivation, and I would say, if anything, that's quite low, especially if you drive a thirsty or larger vehicle where you're going to pay more insurance, you're going to pay more in fuel, you're going to pay more for tires, you're going to pay more for oil, etc., etc., etc. But just using that 0.67 per mile. Now, obviously, again, if you go do the intelligent thing, you buy a 2005 Corolla used, yeah, you're going to be spending a lot less than that. But the average American, based on these statistics, is not doing that. So you do that, right? At 0.67 per mile, multiplied by 7,250 miles, you're talking 4,857.5 a year. Saved and invested in the S&P 500 over 10 years, that's 70 grand over 10 years, which over age 60 would be over, age 60 alone, it would be over 600,000. If you let it compound to age 70, it would be over $1 million. Huge amount of money, okay? Now, my personal number came up to 83 to 94,000 if you used a more accurate, in my opinion, reimbursement number of per mileage costs. using depreciation and new car costs and insurance costs and yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to go too far into that. That's a bit nerdy. And if you guys want me to do the derivation on that, just ask. What do you think of the IRS? There we go. We just talked about that. I think it's very generous because if you're intelligent, you can get your operating costs of driving much lower than that. But for the average American, if anything, it's not generous enough in the sense of the average American spends a lot more than that. Did you bike in high school during the winter in Nebraska? No, I didn't, but that's because we had a school bus that happened to be pretty close to my house, so I would just walk and use the school bus. Yes, I rode the bus in high school. You can do that. It's not, yeah, you might have a stigma, but you know what? You're 16. You're fucking penniless. You shouldn't be driving a car anyway. Okay? And then, to your point, in Nebraska, when I went to the gym, you know what? I'd walk there. Now, I didn't bike there mostly because the conditions weren't very good for it. It was pretty icy, and I would rather hoof it. In fact, a lot of the time I'd run. It'd be my cardio. In negative 10 degree weather. I mean, Nebraska winters get fucking cold. You live in the Midwest. You know Nebraska winters are, they're not Minnesota or North Dakota, but they're certainly not warm either. Let's say you get perishables on your bike on your way home from work, then every 2 to 3 weeks you make a big Costco run in a car, rental, or order non-perishable items online like from Amazon. Even Costco, you can get Costco delivered now. I've thought about doing that. So there's loads and loads of ability if you wish to go that way. Externalities are going to drive those costs right back up. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on a lot of. You can add in whatever externalities you'd like, but the math is pretty clear. You're going to save a shit ton of money, right? Okay, now those are just the savings from less car ownership or no car ownership. What about the upsides to cycling itself? So we've just been talking about ditching the car. In theory, you could have gotten all of these benefits from using public transit instead. But here's some microeconomic benefits to health. The average commute is roughly 25 minutes in the United States. The average cycling, if you were to replace that with cycling, let's say it takes about 50 minutes. Yeah, you might need to move a little closer to work, but you won't have to pay for parking, so it about evens out. Let's just go ahead and say that. 50 minutes of cycling for an average person, it'll burn about 400 calories every day. So let's say it's 400 calories a day, 5 days a week. You total that up in a year, it's 100,000 calories for 50 weeks a year, so you take 2 weeks off. That's enough to burn at 28.5 pounds of body fat. Per the National Institute of Health, right, the annual direct medical costs of obesity are $2,500 a year alone, okay? That's just direct costs. That's going to the doctor more, having things like triple bypasses, you name it, right? Cycling would more or less solve the obesity issue within 2 years for most people. Most people who are fat or obese aren't more than 28.5, or certainly not more than 56, 57 pounds overweight. So there you go. That's going to solve all that problem. If you save this and invested the funds, $2,500 a year alone, okay, that is a bare minimum. We're not talking about quality of life. That's 36 grand over 10 years, probably, and those numbers are from 2015. So it's probably, adjust that for inflation, it's closer to 48 to 50 grand now. So you add that to the 173,000, you get your total of $221,000 per year for an obese person ditching the car. That's over $1 million over a career. What more would you like me to say? Right, and the best part, cycling has never been easier to start doing. With the dawn of electric bicycles getting cheaper and cheaper year after year after year, oh, but inflation's driving car prices up. Oh no, oh geez, oh crap. Wait a minute. I can spend $1,000 and get a reasonable, if not perfect, e-bike, or better yet, if you buy one used, you can find it real cheap. All of a sudden, why e-bike prices keep going down every year, but car prices keep going on up every year. It's almost like you could have a substitution. It's basic economics, substitute goods. Okay? So several studies, by the way, have shown that e-bike riders might not burn as many calories per minute or per mile, but they tend to ride more miles in general because it's easier. As a result, they burn more calories. So now, okay, we're getting to other microeconomic benefits. Okay, we've just talked about microeconomic benefits, right? Between lower healthcare expenses, longer life expectancy, higher quality of life, better dating prospects, because come on, right? Again, who wouldn't want to? Is this more attractive, right? Which is more attractive on the dating market, a six-pack or a keg? Time saved from not needing to do cardio at the gym, right? If you're cycling everywhere, I don't ever do cardio in the gym pretty much. Why would I need to? I get my plenty of cardio going out hiking and other stuff, but mostly from cycling. But all of those, I left all of those benefits to the side. You can calculate the monetary value on living a higher quality life on your own time, but it's got to be worth a very large sum. So that's the microeconomic side. There's a new BMI category of people for over 40 called severe obesity for sure. Trump imposes more tariffs on Chinese goods. The cost of e-bikes will go up as well. Yes, but it's still going to be far cheaper, even with the tariffs in 2025 than it was in, say, 2018, just because of much more supply. That's how far e-bike prices have fallen. Hang on. Sounds good. My ride for going to Cocoa Head's coming in a few minutes, so we'll wrap this up. I didn't mean for this to be a long stream anyway. Okay, let's talk about the macro side of it now, because this is where it gets fun, and this is where Bull gets to talk about his favorite topic in the whole wide world, the Interstate Highways Act of 1956 and its consequences. Where else on YouTube do you get people ranting about someone ranting about the interstate while also talking about how to get a six-pack? This is what I bring to you, ladies and gentlemen. And if you don't like that, find another channel to watch. Okay. Here we go. Macro and societal benefits. So this one, again, these are overly conservative numbers, really, as is befitting of a nuclear engineer. I came up with minimum, absolute lowest minimum of $168 billion collectively saved by society, roughly $15 billion of which is direct savings to the US taxpayer. Given that even the spending-happy Biden administration allocated only a mere $45 million to bicycle infrastructure over in their last spending bill, at 45 million versus 15 billion, it seems as though the healthcare savings alone, ignoring all the other benefits, would more than justify additional bike infrastructure. Especially if bike infrastructure can be linked to higher cycling rates, which, spoiler alert, it can. Okay, there's a reason Boston and Minneapolis have higher cycling rates than Los Angeles and Honolulu, right? The weather here is literally more, you couldn't make it more conducive to cycling, and yet Honolulu has a much lower cycling rate than Minneapolis, one of the cities with the worst weather in the United States. Okay, per the National Council on Aging, in 2016, the total costs of combating obesity in the United States accounted for $260 billion, all right? Now that's everybody, right? So now, what percentage of those people are on socialized or welfare medicine? That's Medicare and Medicaid. Well, you boil it all on down, but when it comes to, this is, I think the Rhode Island Hospital Review Board said that on average, Medicare users were typically 26% more likely to be obese than the average American. Medicaid users were typically 27% more likely. So you've got more obese people on average on the dole, okay? So there is also a connection between higher obesity rates and poorer, denser neighborhoods within an urban area. Those are the places where infrastructure benefits may get people to cycle the most. So again, all I'm doing here by putting these statistics in is saying, yo, these are really conservative numbers. If anything, they're so conservative that they really are understating the case. But on obesity care alone, Medicaid is estimated to spend $8 billion a year. Medicare is estimated, and I used a formula to calculate this based on the percentage of Americans who are on Medicare, that they're more likely to be obese, and so on and so forth, is $62.05 billion on obesity care alone. In other words, we're talking just between Medicare and Medicaid, $70 billion a year. That's more than the Ukraine aid we're giving out, okay? That is a lot of fucking money, all right? And that's just from taxpayer costs of obesity alone. Now, okay, we're gonna go ahead and say, hang on, not everybody is going to start to cycle and stop being obese. A lot of medical, elderly people are old, but okay, let's just say a fraction of them do. Let's just say a mere 5% of people on Medicare and Medicaid elect to begin cycling enough to alleviate their obesity. You do that, you get $3.5 billion between Medicare and Medicaid total. And this isn't even addressing the number of obese people for which the taxpayer subsidizes healthcare through the Affordable Healthcare, the ACA, or Obamacare markets. Yes, that's subsidized healthcare. It's just not 100% subsidized healthcare. It's still government-run healthcare, or at least heavily government-influenced healthcare. So we're talking $3.5 billion alone from direct healthcare savings to the cost of the taxpayer of just 5% of people on Medicare and Medicaid alone did that. You factor in the ACA, you're probably doubling or tripling that number at minimum. I'm not going to go there, but just to let you know. Now let's talk about welfare reduction savings, okay? Roughly 27% of working age Americans are on some form of welfare. Assuming the average person on welfare only spends a third of the average American's total on cars, which seems pretty plausible, probably, honestly, a bit conservative again. You're talking $4,100 a year. Assuming 10% of the people on the welfare chose bikes instead of cars and saved the money, and therefore would be able to get out of welfare a little bit easier, the total collective savings to the taxpayer would equal about $23.5 billion, right? Let's just go ahead and say, of those, we're only taking 10% of that 10% that actually get off the dole. It's still $235 million, which would pay for a lot of bike infrastructure, all right? Transportation cost savings. We spend $79 billion annually on public transit in the United States. $54 billion of that is spent on operations, and roughly half of that, those trips are made by bus. So if we're spending on buses billions and billions of dollars, but we can get people on biking instead, maybe we don't have to run quite as many bus routes. We can eliminate some of them, or at least the least efficient ones, especially for like intercity circulator routes. Now all of a sudden, that's some savings that public transit can use either to improve service elsewhere or, I don't know, maybe build bike infrastructure from. Rounded it all out, again, assuming increased cycling would only render maybe 5% of bus operations nationwide obsolete, you get $675 million. You can quibble with the numbers, you can lower that or raise that, but it would stand to suggest that it's still a good chunk of money. Let's talk about infrastructure savings, okay? We spend $52 billion on highways federally. We spend $154 billion on state and local spending on highways, right? Even just a 1% of shift of traffic from cars and trucks to bikes using the fourth power law, that means, right, a bike does no damage to the roads. Cars and trucks do a lot of damage on the roads. The most damage on the roads, of course, comes from things like semis and buses, but all those cars and trucks, because there's such a high volume of them, adds up over time. In other words, let's just say a little bit of that modal shift, you're going to end up saving just by fewer cars on the road with traffic. You're going to save roughly about $9 billion a year on average, okay? Then the big one, $154 billion of time savings from reduced traffic, okay? Follow me here. The average American spends 54 hours of excess time stuck in traffic per year. This is for the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. For the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, 87% of all trips taken by Americans were by personal vehicles. That means cars and trucks. 52% of all trips taken, regardless of transit mode, were under 3 miles a day, which is bikeable. 28% were under 1 mile a day, suggesting that if the whole is 87% car, and those 52 and 28% are under 3 and 1 miles per day respectively, there's a lot of excessive and unnecessary trips taken by car that could be replaced by bike or even by, frankly, walking, because 3 miles just isn't that far. But per a Belgian transit study, a mere 10% modal shift to motorcycles reduces congestion by 40%. A shift to bicycles on separate bicycle lanes is going to do even more. So the idea here is very simple. Since they wouldn't be on the roads at all, you get more people on bikes, especially if they're independent bike lanes to put them on, bike paths to put them on, you reduce traffic. You reduce traffic, traffic flows faster. Traffic flows faster, people save time. 350 million people saving time, and that adds up quickly. On average, if you're able to do this to the point where you could save 21.6 hours saved. Multiply that by the average working wage of $30.48 an hour. That is $154 billion. So the clear conclusion is anything to reduce traffic is the biggest part of this. But it doesn't take, all I have to do is look over the crater here to the horrific Honolulu skyline project to see that the government can fuck things up very easily. What's nice about a bike path is that you can't graft it very easily. All it is 10, maybe 15 feet of asphalt if you're generous, or concrete. All you gotta do is maintain it every now and then, although this fucking state doesn't do that. I love living here, but I have some thoughts about the state government, and some of them are not very good. Anyway, where I'm going with this is very simple. The amount of money you save here, again, this is immense, okay? And this is overly conservative. This is a fraction of the total population started switching to cycling. Not to mention, okay, a few other things. Birth rates. People are talking about low birth rates and how it's going to make Social Security a huge demographics issue. Well, if more people were cycling, they'd be less obese. If the obesity rates went down, people would, in general, be hotter, which would mean there'd be more economic incentives to the dating market, which means you might see more relationships, which means you're probably going to see more babies, all right? You can figure out the costs of that somewhere. I don't know how to calculate that, but you can see that that's going to be an economic value. Furthermore, is the geopolitical implications, right? In 2020, we cut oil consumption because of the COVID disease by about 20%. Actually, not even. Well, yeah, about 18% from 2019 to 2020. That put us back to levels we last saw in 1998. Well, what happened then? Oil prices went through the floor, and there was such an oversupply that people were paying money in April of 2020 to buy oil. You were getting paid to buy oil. The oil prices went negative for a while. Now, I'm not saying that would happen again if we had people adopting cycling, but what would happen is the world's biggest producer of oil, the United States, would all of a sudden have a lot of excess oil, which means gas prices would go down. But more accurately, the United States would be able to start exporting oil. If we started exporting oil, we would take the Saudis, the Iranians, and the Russians and put them under our star-spangled boots. Okay? You'd end the war in Ukraine very quickly. You'd probably end a lot of the shit in the Middle East a lot more quickly. There's a huge benefit to this. Further considerations, I mean, this isn't even talking about environmental consequences, things like reduced cancer cases due to producing and extracting less oil, right? Even ignoring global warming, we're talking about things like tire dust, brake dust, and benzene come from things like gasoline manufacturing and production. It would be massive. I mean, hell, just alone, I mean, every so often you hear about a container, you know, the tanks that sit underneath gas stations leaking into the water table or the environment. That's gasoline that's getting into the natural water supply or the environment. That's not good. So the whole point here that I'm making is that the savings are incalculably large. Why would you do anything else if you were the government? Well, the answer is that I think it's corruption. You can't make a political pork barrel project out of a bike path. It's too lean. You can't. It also is a big function of the average American's fucking laziness. The average American is unexceptional these days. The average American doesn't work very hard these days. I love this country, but I think we can be better. And ride a goddamn bicycle and watch your life change for the better. Anyway. Yeah, so as far as Trump's tariffs are concerned, I'm not a huge fan of Trump's protectionist economic policy, but again, he's been talking about tariffs of 20 to 50% in general. So let's just take a 50% tariff. Let's say that $1,000 Chinese e-bike now becomes $1,500 compared to a $40,000 car. Do you really care that much, right? Or just say a $2,000 car now, or e-bike now it's $3,000. Does that suck? Yeah, sure, but hell. You've even got some states, which I will give credit to, and I don't like doing this, the state of California, for instance, which are actively pushing subsidies and rebates for buying electric bicycles. That's a fantastic idea. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm also a huge fan of And this one goes out to the liberal governments. They've talked about this in New York State, and they've been talking about it here. Stop with this licensing bullshit, okay? With e-bikes, don't bother with licensing. Don't bother with registration. Don't bother with fees. Make it as simple and convenient as possible to spur adoption. Worry about all that bullshit with fees and licensing and regulations later. Don't strangle the baby in the cradle, for God's sake. Don't be stupid. You resist the urge to be your standard left-wing welfare statists, okay? God, I sound like I'm fucking ranting, I sound like I'm goddamn Alex Jones, but resist the urge, okay? Resist the fucking urge to make this a big bureaucratic process. Don't make obtaining an e-bike like registering a car, because registering a car is one of the most miserable things you can do. The DMV is a horrible place to go. A huge side benefit of e-bikes, you could say to people, hey, do you hate the DMV? Well, with an e-bike, you don't have to go. That would be very, very convenient and very, very nice for a lot of people. Of course, that would be then, those are government jobs that you no longer need, which saves the taxpayer further money. There you go. There's another knock-on effect. There's loads and loads of other knock-on effects like that, but it would serve to make our country, our government, our civil services, and our infrastructure much leaner and more efficient, and efficiency is the highest form of beauty. There you go. That's my economic analysis on cycling. At minimum, $70,000 to $220,000 a year per person. At minimum, $168 billion to American society. That is going to be it for me today. I have got to go hike Cocoa Head. So until next time, make good decisions like riding a bike, because those good decisions form your actions, like riding a bike, and those actions form your habits, like getting into the habit of riding a bike, and those habits form your values, like valuing riding a bike. And all of a sudden, that is going to be a guide star. It's going to set an ethos guide star through the rough waters of life, and might just end up looking like this. Shoots, y'all. Come in for the hot. And if y'all don't like this, content, unsubscribe. Because this is what I enjoy doing. Shoots. Take it easy, y'all.